Every time a crow cawed, a soul departed, leaving this world in the throes of extreme hunger. Their emaciated bodies, skin stretched tight over bones, were wrapped in torn mats or whatever scraps they could find. Soon, there were too many dead to even wrap. Bodies lay scattered, piled upon each other. There were no living left to bury the dead. Finally, the miserable corpses became prey for flocks of black crows, tearing them apart. That was long ago, a time when Thanh, even his parents, hadn't yet been born. But that pain remains eternally etched in one of the darkest pages of the nation's history, in the memories of those who survived. Whether by one means or another, in the memory of the elderly like Grandma Heen, Than's grandmother, the 1945 famine, preceding the August Revolution, was still vivid. 2/3 of the village had starved, yet the La family remained untouched. Not a single member perished in that horrific famine. The August Revolution was like a spring rain, bringing life back to desperate, wretched souls. But from that point on, the Lai Hai family slowly withered, with no one left capable of rebuilding the once-renowned legacy in Lan Thuong village. Recently, Thanh, Grandma Heen's only grandson, brought new hope to the Lai Hai family. Thanh passed his entrance exams to a prestigious university and moved to Hanoi to study. Fortunate and successful, a few years after graduating, he bought a house, a car, and started a family. Mai, Than's wife, was also a native of Hanoi. The villagers began to praise and admire the return of the Lai Hai family after 3 generations of hardship. Starting from Than's grandfather's generation, when he passed away, Than's father was still an infant. Everything fell under Grandma Heen's guidance, while Mr. Tone, Than's father, bore the stigma of being a landlord's son. His background barred him from education and exams, forcing him to accept life as an ordinary farmer. Eventually, Grandma Heen found him an old maid to marry, and a few years later, Thanh was born. Fortunately for the Lai Hai family, there was finally an heir. The villagers marveled at Than's success because, at just 30 years old compared to his peers, Thanh had it all. A house, a car, a beautiful wife, intelligent children, a happy family with a stable job and an enviable salary. The villagers said that Than's family had been blessed since the time of his ancestors, always respected and admired in the village, and now it was a return exactly as Grandma Heen had wished. For every person loved, there's one hated. Many loved to embellish the thrilling, vivid tales of people from earlier times. Thanh didn't know their faces, his grandfather, great-grandfather, if he knew them at all. It was only through their ancestral portraits on the altar or through ghost stories. And still, there was no shortage of curses and resentment. Although those directly involved in those grievances had all passed on to the other side, Thanh didn't know if they met and shared tales of the current human world. And that his ancestors always followed to shelter and protect their descendants. That was everything Grandma Heen taught him from a young age. To be precise, Thanh was educated by his grandmother from childhood, not by his parents. 2 failures, born to carry their grandmother's wishes, but Grandma Heen herself had never fully told him about the wealth and power of the Lai Hai family. That was a secret only she knew. Even now, stories still circulate among the people of Lan Thuong village about the ancient kapok tree at the village entrance, with a moss-covered shrine at its base, and the abandoned, half-built house, garden, and pond in the middle of the village belonging to Ms. Zone's family. The villagers often called it the Famine Grave, and sometimes, in the quiet of deep night, people would still catch glimpses and hear the cries of a woman calling for her child. To many outsiders looking at Than's seemingly happy and fulfilled family, it was a case of only those under the blanket know if there are fleas. The simmering conflicts and cracks within the family were just waiting to erupt and sweep everything away. Mai's family always looked down on Than's family, considering them rustic and unworthy, mocking their provincial ways even though the two had been together and had 2 children. If Mai hadn't accidentally gotten pregnant and been told by the doctor to marry, it probably wouldn't have been Than's turn. Moreover, the school had given the children a break to avoid the epidemic, so Than's shop had been closed for almost a month. Even if it opened, there were no customers. Mai was different. She still had her job at the bank. So, Thanh and the 2 children packed their belongings into the car to go back to the countryside, planning to return when the kids went back to school. Thanh expected this, knowing the children weren't excited about this trip back home. They had only just returned to the city a few days after Tet, but staying in the city meant father and children cooped up indoors, playing video games together. It was stifling, suffocating, and unfortunately, there was also the risk of illness. Returning to the countryside would offer fresh air. Grandma Heen, his parents, almost everyone was still there. Driving a luxurious car into the city, making money at a keyboard, if he stripped all that away, Thanh was just like his parents, a true farmer. Perhaps not because Grandma Heen was supreme. Both his grandparents were people of status in the district or commune back then. People called them landlords, powerful figures, or local chiefs. Occasionally, she would sigh, reminiscing about the distant past. The elderly often do. Our family's land used to be so vast, she'd say, as wide as 2 of these villages combined. Hearing Grandma Heen say this, Thanh could somewhat imagine his family's glorious past. He looked up at the picture on the altar, trying to guess the family's former standing. But ever since his grandfather died, rumored by the old villagers to have been struggled to death, his parents' generation had fallen into decline, becoming true farmers. Nevertheless, occasionally, villagers would still spread rumors. Grandma Heen's house was said to hide gold, even jars of gold or golden beetle nuts and leaves buried in the garden. Whether these stories of gold and silver were true, no one knew. No one in the family ever confirmed it. No one would answer those questions. Any inquiries were simply brushed aside by Grandma Heen. She dismissed them as fabricated rumors, even scolding anyone who listened to such nonsense. Past and present remained like a shimmering, elusive mist, never truly revealed. The elderly who knew the old village stories had all gradually passed on, and the one who knew best, the one who was there, Grandma Heen, never spoke. However, despite society's turbulent changes and hardships, Than's family remained somewhat more stable compared to others. Though not excessively wealthy, they maintained their traditional ways. Later, when Thanh grew up, he realized his parents were more hardworking and resourceful than other ordinary farmers, still relying on their fields and gardens, raising pigs, chickens, and ducks. Perhaps this was why he and Mai always had conflicts with the entire family. Even though these were just generational disagreements, deemed old-fashioned and outdated, he saw something in Grandma Heen that resembled Mai. Noble and upper class, not rustic like his parents. Lan Thuong village was about a 3-hour drive from Hanoi, but because he had to finish work, after lunch, Thanh and the 2 children immediately got into the car and left Hanoi under a gloomy gray sky. The roads were deserted, none of the usual crowded traffic of days past. Reaching the village after 4 p.m., the afternoon sky in the north was drizzling spring rain, turning dark earlier than usual. It was already dusk past 4 p.m., but from afar, Thanh recognized he was nearing the village entrance. Looking up ahead, a whole corner of the sky was dominated by the kapok tree. Even from several kilometers away, the village's kapok tree stood majestically like a giant mountain. The only difference was that this mountain changed color with the seasons. The oldest person in the village, like Grandma Heen, nearly 90 years old this year, couldn't recall when that kapok tree first grew there. Growing up, Thanh and the other village children had always seen the kapok tree with its gnarled, gigantic, oddly shaped trunk standing there. Even now, over 30 years later, the kapok tree's base remained the same, vaguely recalling childhood memories of herding buffalo nearby or sneaking into its hollow trunk to play. Though the trunk was hollow, large enough for a small child to fit inside, no one knew why it was like that. But on winter days, the children would crawl inside to escape the cold, mischievously lighting small fires within. Oddly, despite its hollow base, the kapok tree still stood tall and firm in the middle of the field, never toppled by storms or strong winds. Remember not to crawl into the hollow of that kapok tree. There are ghosts there, many dead people, and even vengeful spirits still lurking and sheltering at the base of the kapok tree. Those spirits will harm you now. The words of Grandma Heen, spoken almost 30 years ago, still echoed in his ears. He smiled at the distant childhood memories. Perhaps Thanh was blessed with great fortune and a strong destiny, which was why he saw nothing unusual at the kapok tree's base. Even now, he thought Grandma Heen was just trying to scare him back then, but many others hadn't been so lucky. Vague stories he'd never witnessed firsthand. Rumor had it that Mr. Tone had nearly died there a couple of times, and occasionally, someone working in the fields would be struck dead by lightning, or someone broken-hearted, or with family troubles, would hang themselves there. These incidents could all be explained. There was nothing truly ghostly or mysterious about them. The car slowly approached the kapok tree. The two children, seeing the brilliant red flowers, burst out excitedly. Kim Ann, Than's eldest daughter, exclaimed, "The flowers are so beautiful, Dad. What kind of flowers are these, Dad?" "Those are our village kapok flowers, dear," Than explained with an affectionate smile. Kim Ann and Tuan Ann pressed themselves against the car window, fascinated, observing the kapok tree standing majestically in the spring rain. The spring raindrops seemed to give the vibrant red kapok blossoms an uncanny allure. "Dad, let's go take pictures there, Dad," Kim Ann suggested. "What a great idea. A wonderfully picturesque scene, steeped in the essence of the northern countryside." How could Than refuse? At first glance, Than was already captivated by these unique and magnificent angles. But in his mind, his grandmother's warning echoed. "Remember not to crawl into the hollow of that kapok tree. There are ghosts there, many dead people, and even vengeful spirits dwelling under its shadow." Those words made him hesitate. The car drove closer to the kapok tree. The deep red color, like lipstick or blood, held an even more eerie charm for the three of them. "I don't know kapok flowers," Tuan Ann, his youngest son, pleaded. Than wanted his children to have beautiful childhood experiences and memories, things the city couldn't offer. So, he inadvertently ignored his grandmother's reminder. "Just for a little while, okay?" Than negotiated with his two children. They happily agreed. He turned the car onto the shoulder of the dirt road, about 20 meters from the national highway to the kapok tree's base. He knew and had walked on this dirt road since he was as young as his children were now. This road was typically used by farmers to harvest and transport agricultural supplies to the fields. Due to the spring rain, the grass on the roadside was lush, velvety green beneath the three's shoes. The three frolicked for a moment, then reached the fallen red flowers scattered all over the ground. In his early days working in the fields with his parents, Than had seen a flat piece of land, half the size of the communal yard, at the base of the kapok tree. Next to the kapok tree stood a shrine, perennially covered in green moss. Villagers only came to light incense at this shrine a couple of times a year, paying little attention or talking about it. The yard in front of the shrine was also strangely neglected, though adjacent to the fields, it lay fallow, no one tending it. While the grass on the field's edge was strangely vibrant green, the ground in the shrine yard was almost bare and smooth, with hardly any plants growing to adorn the brilliant kapok blossoms. Than stood holding his children's hands, gazing at the deserted yard, the moss-covered shrine nestled beneath the colossal kapok tree. The gloomy, drizzly afternoon sky was beautiful, but a shiver ran down his spine as he slowly looked up at the giant, blood-red canopy that seemed to engulf all three of them. The two children let go of Than's hands and dashed into the yard. The feeling was familiar, like when he used to rush into the yard to play with the neighborhood kids. The two children picked up the fallen kapok flowers with faces full of delight. They seemed never to have been so happy. "Dad, take our picture, Dad?" Little Kim Ann startled Than, who quickly nodded. "Oh, Dad will take pictures of both of you." Than pulled his new smartphone from his pants pocket and took pictures of the two children. As they picked the flowers, he watched them playing as if in someone's yard, yet he felt an eerie sensation, as if someone was standing behind, watching their every small move. Than continuously snapped pictures from beautiful, lively, and poetic angles. These photos, posted on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, would surely draw admiration from his friends. This very beauty and eerie charm mesmerized him, making him forget his doubts and fears. He raised his phone, continuously taking panoramic shots of the kapok tree. While Than was absorbed in these hauntingly beautiful scenes, the two children he didn't know when disappeared from the darkest side of the kapok tree. A woman appeared with long hair covering her entire face, wearing a tattered brown baba shirt and black trousers of an ancient style. Her gaze fixed, she struck his phone. Than jumped in fright, dropping his phone, and looked around blankly to search. It was already dusk, and silence lay all around the yard, brilliant with red kapok flowers. The two children had vanished, as if an invisible force had snatched them away. Almost immediately, a flock of black crows flew in from the sky, landing on the kapok tree's crown. Their mournful caws startled him, jolting him into true panic. "Kim Ann, Tuan Ann, where are you children, where?" Than called out, his voice seemingly too small against the cacophony of crows cawing as if at a bursting market overhead. Red kapok flowers covered the ground, and the two children had truly disappeared from sight. In this desolate, empty place, where could they have hidden? Kim Ann, Tu and Ann, where are you, my children? Than called out again, but only silence answered his cry. The crows above seemed to have found their place, now silently looking down at Than, who was frantically searching for his children in a state of panic. The sky had already darkened, and a light drizzle was falling. Him Ann, Tu and Ann, Grandma Heen's voice echoed in his head. Remember not to crawl into the hollow of that kapok tree. There are ghosts there, many dead people, and even vengeful spirits within. Than instinctively turned to look directly at the moss-covered shrine at the base of the kapok tree. This is the only place left, Than thought to himself. How strange, how could the two of them fit in there? He knew his children's personalities. They weren't overly curious or prone to mischievous games. His feet stepping on the kapok flowers, he approached the shrine nestled near the gnarled kapok tree and softly called out, "Are you two in there? Don't hide from Dad. It's getting dark, children, let's go back to Grandpa and Grandma." A chilling silence answered Than's call. Gathering all his courage, Than approached the shrine. It had been more than 20 years since Than had visited this place. Inside the small shrine, there was nothing, no one worshipped. Only a cold incense burner with a few lonely red incense sticks embedded within. A quick glance suggested these sticks had been placed long ago. So the two children couldn't be here. The only other place was the hollow of the kapok tree, but why would they crawl in there? Without further hesitation, Than rushed to the kapok tree. Indeed, Tu and Ann had crawled inside. Kim Ann, however, sat outside, huddled in fear. Than quickly knelt, anxiously asking his daughter, "What's wrong?" Kim Ann's eyes were vacant. She looked at her father in a daze, shaking her head vigorously as if someone had sealed her mouth. "Stay quiet here, wait a moment." Leaving the girl, Than crawled into the kapok tree's hollow. But the cavity was too large for him to crawl in and pull the boy out, even though he could see him curled up inside. "Come out. Let's go home, it's dark already." He had never seen his son look at him with such fear. "My friend wants me to stay and play with him and wait for his mom to come back." Than frantically looked around. At this hour, there was no one here but the three of them and the crows on the kapok tree branches staring down. Than calmed himself, refraining from shouting at his son, understanding that in this situation, anger or scolding a child would solve nothing. His son's fearful retreat inside would only complicate matters. "Your friend's mom isn't coming back, but we have to go home." Than felt even greater dread when he saw his son chewing a kapok flower ravenously, as if he'd been starving for days. "How did Dad know?" He nodded and replied, "Dad knows, let's go home, Grandma and Auntie are waiting." The boy looked towards a corner as if someone was sitting next to him. Than reached inside. The boy gently nodded. "My friend will catch me and my sister if we go home." "That's not going to happen, be a good boy, come with Dad. No one can do anything to us once we're home." After a moment's thought, Than smiled and nodded, soothing and reassuring Tu and Ann. As long as the boy came out and they could go home and escape this eerie kapok tree hollow with the black crows staring down from the branches. Tu and Ann's eyes were full of fear. He said firmly, "My friend is coming to get me and my sister, Kim Ann. He said he's been waiting here for a long time." Than tried to talk to the boy who was mumbling nonsense. By now, Than had lost patience with him, so he just gave a generic answer so the three of them could get home quickly. He was truly terrified of this place. He couldn't stay here another second. He looked straight into his son's eyes as if challenging him. "You can do whatever you want, but we have to go home." The boy's eyes, filled with extreme fear, stared into the empty space opposite him. He instinctively reached out his hand, afraid Than would change his mind and pull it back. Than pulled him out forcefully, leaving one shoe inside the kapok tree hollow. Carrying the boy on his shoulder and holding Kim Ann's hand, the three rushed away from the kapok tree as if chased by ghosts. But Than didn't realize that the boy was still happily eating the kapok flower in his hand, his eyes still fixed on the kapok tree. His mouth mumbled a curse. A curse Kim Ann had picked up from somewhere while gathering kapok flowers, not knowing its meaning. Holding Tu and Ann and leading Kim Ann, the three ran as if pursued by demons, away from the kapok tree and its moss-covered shrine. So Than didn't question what the boy was saying. Only when the two children were safely in the car did he regain his composure, looking at the kapok tree, wondering if he had done something foolish. Than turned to look at the two children, their eyes hazy and vacant, staring towards the kapok tree. It was already dark. The kapok tree, which a few hours earlier had been as vibrant red as fresh blood, now appeared like a black skeleton standing starkly against the sky. "Are you two okay?" A terrifying silence from the two children answered Than's question. "Well, let's go home then." Than asked himself and then answered. As the car was about to roll, a flock of crows cawed mournfully, soaring into the sky above the kapok tree's crown, as if someone had startled them away. The black shadow of the crows and the kapok tree gradually shrank and then disappeared. Than drove the car back to the village entrance. Though it was a rural area, the village had developed significantly over the years, no less than a city. The roads were wide and paved with concrete, and there were even high-pressure streetlights. So, as he drove to the village gate, he felt more secure, no longer as frightened as when he had left the kapok tree. The car stopped in front of his house. He opened the car door for the two children to get out. It was completely dark. The ancient house with its yin-yang tiled roof, limwood doors, and moss-covered exterior had been built and inhabited by generations. As a child, Than used to hate this house. It was unlike, even alien, to the other houses in Lan Thuong village. Later, when he made money, a lot of money, Than wanted to demolish it and rebuild a beautiful, modern, contemporary house. But Grandma Heen refused. "If you tamper with this land, something bad will happen." She said it so sternly that no one dared to act. His father was merely her faint shadow, and his mother was like a hired hand. From childhood, Than never saw Grandma Heen, his grandmother, go to a pagoda to worship Buddha. But Than knew she was a very strong believer in feng shui. Recently, however, Than had grown to love the house's architecture, and he felt her decision was correct. Many of his wealthy friends who visited admired the solid, black limwood columns, so massive that it took two people to embrace them, standing majestically in the middle of the house. Than only renovated the old office furniture for daily living expenses to give everyone their private space. Than's mother stood at the gate as if she had been waiting for the three of them for a long time. As soon as she saw them, she quickly asked, "What happened? Why are you three so late?" She looked down and saw Kim Ann still holding kapok flowers in her hand, Tuan Ann's mouth still stained red with chewed petals, his lower legs muddy and uneven, and he had even lost one shoe. "What happened? Where did you get these kapok flowers?" she asked urgently, but Than clearly saw fear on her face. Than stammered, unsure what to say, and she asked, as if answering herself, "You took the two children to the kapok tree at the village entrance, didn't you?" His silence was an admission. Than knew that whenever he made a mistake in the past, he would often respond with such silence. "Why did you do that, Than? You're an adult, a husband, a father. How could you make such a reckless, childish decision?" She quickly embraced the two children. He stood staring at her, frozen, wiping away tears. "You three, come inside and light incense for your grandparents. Throw these things away, it's not good to have them in the house." She threw the kapok flowers from Kim Ann's hand, scattering them to the other side of the road, then tightly held the children's hands and rushed them inside, as if afraid some force would snatch her grandchildren away. Returning home, Than hadn't bought any gifts, only some fruit to offer at the ancestral altar. This was a habit Grandma Heen had taught him since childhood. After Than finished lighting the incense, the three of them bowed before the ancestral altar, hoping for some invisible protection. The faint scent of incense made the house feel warmer, less cold since they had returned from the kapok tree. After lighting the incense, Than intended to go into Grandma Heen's room. Mai took the two children to bathe and change. Mr. Tone wasn't home, so Than hadn't had a chance to ask where he was. As he entered, Grandma Heen immediately spoke. "What's wrong? Than, are you home, son?" "Yes, Grandma, I brought the children home. The school gave them a break to avoid the epidemic." "Grandma, why did I bring the children back so late? Is Mai coming home?" Than stammered for a moment. "Yes, Mai is still at work, Grandma. I was busy today, so we're late." "I thought she was coming with you. I had something I wanted to discuss with you, too." "Is it still about Tet, Grandma?" "What else could it be?" Grandma Heen's voice was slow and deliberate. Than smiled and sat on the bed. Grandma Heen also sat up. "It's still about what I discussed with Mai, as you know. But why?" Than hesitated. "But Mai only wants to have children like this. One boy, one girl, that's enough." Grandma Heen maintained her slow, steady voice. "For other families, that's perfect, but for our family, I don't want the worst thing to happen when a third flame flickers and then goes out. Listen to me, I'm not wrong. Convince Mai to have another child, I believe you can do it." Than sat in silence. Grandma Heen suddenly sighed, seemingly disappointed. These past few days, northern Vietnam had been cold and drizzly, so Grandma Heen rarely left her bed. Nearly 90 years old, she was still healthy and sharp-witted. She wasn't the oldest in the village, but she remembered every detail of events that had occurred in the village since ancient times. Everything was as clear as an encyclopedia. Stories not recorded in the village's books, from when the Japanese forced people to uproot rice to plant jute and castor beans, leading to the 1945 famine, to the Viet Minh destroying French granaries as they swept through the village, to the Bin Lap Lai land reform, the denunciation that led to his grandfather's death when Mr. Tone was still an infant, to the bombings and the formation of cooperatives. Villagers said she would remain sharp until her dying day. However, after Mr. Tone passed away, she rarely spoke of old stories. She would surely take them to her grave, and what she said was never wrong, always full of hidden meanings. Than, invite Grandma to dinner, son. Your father is probably drinking with Uncle Tan tonight, he won't be back. Uncle Tan was Than's paternal uncle, and Mr. Tone was the only son. It was the same for Than's generation. Although he had 2 children now, Grandma Heen only counted 2 in Anne. She rarely mentioned Kim Ann. During Tet, Grandma Heen had encouraged Mai to have another child, but Mai refused, saying that 1 boy and 1 girl were enough. Now, bringing up the topic of having more children was impossible for Mai, unless Than insisted. Now that he was home, Grandma Heen brought up the old issue again, making Than's mood even more unsettled. Mai's voice echoed again, "Than, invite Grandma to dinner, son." "Yes, Mom," Than replied, then turned to his grandmother. "Yes, let's have dinner, Grandma." He helped Grandma Heen to the dining room, saying it was out of affection, though Grandma Heen was strong enough to walk around the house on her own. Outside, people occasionally lit incense at the family's private burial ground in the middle of the field, where his great-grandparents and grandfather were buried. The 2 children, bathed and clean, sat at the dinner table prepared by Than's mother. Than noticed that their faces were no longer as lively and bright as on previous visits to the countryside. Grandma Heen sat down beside the children, and Than helped his mother with things still missing from the table. Standing near the stove, his mother whispered into Than's ear, "Don't tell Grandma that you took the children to the kapok tree this afternoon, remember?" Mai's face suddenly became unusually stern. Than had never seen her like this before. Than understood that his actions that afternoon had been somewhat reckless. "Yes, Mom, I won't do it again." The mother and son went to the dining table, and dinner quickly passed without incident. Than told himself that next time, he must stay away from that kapok tree. He didn't know what had happened, but it certainly wasn't anything good. Mr. Tone didn't return until night. The 2 children slept with their grandmother. After the children had fallen asleep, Than returned to his room. He usually worked at night, so he didn't want to disturb their sleep. Due to the recent conflict, the couple hadn't talked much, just a brief update that the children were home and asleep. Than opened his laptop and looked at the pictures of the kapok tree he had taken that afternoon. Even a professional photographer would surely praise them. The pictures were too beautiful. He paused at the photos of the 2 children sitting in front of the moss-covered shrine. The ground below was vibrant red with kapok flowers, and overhead, the same brilliant red. The pictures were so beautiful, so hauntingly vivid, that he couldn't tear his eyes away. The sound of footsteps entering the adjacent room startled Than, making him pull back, unable to close all the picture tabs he had taken that afternoon. "Mom!" The sound passed quickly, even though the house door was locked. Than thought his mother had just returned from the restroom with the 2 children. Than's voice echoed, "I've put the children to sleep." There was no reply, only the patter of spring rain outside. Than returned to his work, forgetting to review all the photos or upload them to social media as planned to show his friends. It was past 11 p.m., a tiring day was over. He closed all the browsers on his computer. That picture flashed across the screen in the blink of an eye before it turned off. A few new details appeared in the picture, startling him. The image of a child the same age as his 2 children. The child was wearing a tattered brown shirt on a body like a moving skeleton, only its eyes visible, staring at Tu and Ann and Kim Ann. If it weren't for the shirt, Than would have thought what he was seeing was an alien. The laptop screen was now completely off, pitch black. After a tiring day, his eyes were heavy, and sleep quickly overtook him, as if someone had given him a sleeping draft. He thought to himself that at this hour, he could close his eyes and fall asleep anywhere. The weather was cold spring, so as soon as he lay on the bed, pulled up the covers, and reached to turn off the light, he fell into a deep sleep. Outside, he could still hear the patter of rain. like footsteps walking in the unconscious. The laptop screen lit up again as if it had never been turned off. It was like a film being rewound. It paused on a scene. Red kapok flowers scattered across the ground. A sky ablaze with red. A moss-covered shrine at the base of the gnarled kapok tree with its bizarre shapes. A child, unsteady on its feet, walked from the kapok tree towards the three figures. Both moved towards each other under the deep red flowers, ragged and dirty as if they had never lived. Only a pair of bright eyes revealed a living entity. A human, not a moving skeleton. Thanh stood there as if watching a movie, completely unaware that the image of a child was approaching his two children, with a vacant, cold, unfamiliar expression. But deep within those eyes was a profound sadness, from the depths of hell, in the utter despair. Thanh, oblivious, was engrossed in chasing those frames. The child stared blankly at the two children, who seemed mesmerized by its gaze. Distance, space, time, all seemed to have blurred between the three children. Than's two children looked surprised as the child walked out from the kapok tree. Kim Ann at this moment bent down to meticulously pick up the fallen kapok flowers. The girl looked up, still holding the kapok flowers in her hand, and asked, "Where are you from? Why are you here alone? My house is in the village, but they took our house and chased my mom and me out here. I'm waiting for Mom to come back. I'm hungry. This kapok tree is my home, where I wait for Mom." The child's eyes, deeply sad and vacant, looked at the moss-covered shrine beneath the kapok tree. "Where did your mom go?" "To find food. I haven't eaten for many days. What have you eaten these past few days?" "The kapok flowers in your hand." The child's deep, sad eyes, like a hungry ghost, ravenously looked at the two children as if wanting to devour them whole. "Can you eat these kapok flowers?" Tuan Ann innocently asked. The child nodded as if inviting them. "These kapok flowers are like my life source." Tuan Ann, as if hypnotized, took a kapok flower and put it to his mouth. He nibbled it, then chewed it deliciously under the child's eerie gaze. "Do you two want to come to my house?" Tuan Ann's eyes, innocent and vacant, looked at the child and gently nodded. The two children followed the child, walking slowly towards the kapok tree. Tuan Ann crawled into the kapok tree's hollow with the child. Kim Ann probably couldn't fit, so she sat outside. Kim Ann's eyes looked up at the kapok branch dangling low. A woman with long, flowing hair, her neck teasingly hanging right in her line of sight. Tuan Ann, as if hypnotized, showed no resistance or fear. Tuan Ann sat neatly inside the kapok tree hollow, facing the child. Its hungry eyes watched Tuan Ann happily eating the kapok flowers in his hand. Its face, full of longing, stared intently at the boy's tender white neck. It moved closer, intending to bite Tuan Ann's neck. A voice echoed in Than's mind. "Retribution must be paid. Your grandparents caused my family to die out, now your family must suffer the same." Than bolted upright and yelled, "No, stop!" Than woke up immediately after the scream, and outside the deep dark night still pattered with rain. Rushing footsteps approached Than's room, followed by urgent knocking. Open the door, Than," Mai's voice called out urgently, full of fear. Than turned on the light, sprang out of bed, and rushed to open the door. Mai stood stunned, afraid, her terrified eyes clearly showing that something serious had happened in the house. Than feared something had happened to Grandma Heen or his father. "What's wrong, Mom? Calm down and tell me. Is Dad or Grandma okay?" "No, the two children?" Than froze as his mother said it. "What about them, Mom?" Before he could hear what his mother said, he left the room and went to the adjacent one. The bed was empty, no one was there. He was shocked, unable to believe his eyes, and turned back to his mother. "Where did they go? What happened, Mom? What happened?" Mai burst into tears. "Mom, calm down." Than gestured to his mother to try and stay calm. Seeing that the front door was still locked, he ran to all the rooms in the house. He searched every suspicious corner but found nothing. In his panic, Than didn't notice that the back door to the garden was slightly ajar from somewhere. Suddenly returning to the living room, Grandma Heen was awake, her hair tied up, going to his mother's side, which further confused his mind. Than held his phone but didn't know whom to call. He just paced back and forth in the living room, finally sitting down beside the two women. On such a rainy, windy night, where could the two children have gone? The first thing Than thought of was whether they had been kidnapped or were sleepwalking. Hundreds of theories and arguments were put forward, but all contradicted each other. Every nook and cranny of the house had been searched. "Mom, please try to stay calm and tell me what you saw." "If you're not calm, I won't know how to solve this or find the children. Calm down and tell him what you witnessed." "Than, call your father back." Grandma Heen maintained a calm demeanor, as if she partly knew the story and was calculating what to do next. Than hesitated, looking at the clock. It was almost 2 a.m., his father was asleep. On such a cold, rainy, windy night, waking him up. The distance between the two houses wasn't short, but he told Uncle Tan to drive his father home. Than made the call. Mr. Tone was still groggy, but when Than mentioned the two children disappearing into the night, he suddenly woke up. I'll ask Uncle Tan to drive me home right away. Where could they have gone on a night like this? Than hung up, turned to his mother, and saw that she wasn't crying and was calmer. Last night, Mom heard the children's names being called and footsteps outside the window in the rain. Mom thought she was dreaming, but when she woke up and looked next to her, the children were gone. It's all Mom's fault. No, Mom, it's not. Check again carefully, our house isn't that big. How could they have left with the doors locked like this at night? Than stood up, once again checking the corners he might have overlooked, as that was the way to the garden. Grandma Heen stood up, went to the altar, lit incense, and mumbled prayers. Than opened the slightly ajar door leading to the garden. On the wet ground, traces of children's footprints remained. Than knew the two children had left the house this way, but where they went and why, he couldn't explain. Than quickly returned to the living room, speaking quickly to Grandma Heen and his mother. The two of them left through the back door. When Dad gets back, Mom, please tell him for me. I don't know what might happen if Mom comes with me. Mom, you stay home, I'll go look. Grandma Heen knelt before the altar like a statue. Without waiting for her opinion, Than quickly put on a raincoat, grabbing his phone and turning on the flashlight. In the beam of the flashlight, the deep red kapok flowers that Kim Ann had angrily thrown against the wall earlier that evening were now scattered, crushed underfoot, mixing with the rainwater, which was reddish like blood. Than shone the light on the faint wall, revealing a scrawled red message, written with the very kapok flowers. This grudge must now be repaid. Than started, trembling, looking around blankly. The village road was deserted. He followed the faint children's footprints towards the village entrance. The spring rain fell heavily, hitting his face. Amidst the dim village streetlights, the muddy tracks faded until they disappeared completely. The footprints on this road led Than deeper into the village, not towards the kapok tree as he had briefly thought. Standing at a crossroads, Than stood bewildered, unsure where to go to find his two children. The heavy rain fell under the dim yellow lights, leading deeper and deeper into the village. Looking into it, it was a three-dimensional space with no end. In the distance, the road was somewhat strange, yet familiar. He faintly saw the blurry image of a woman calling for her child, her voice echoing in the falling rain. Mom's home, Khang, where are you? In a flash of thought, Than lost all courage to approach the woman's shadowy figure. The closer he got, the further the dark shadow receded. The repeated calls for her child then echoed mournfully in the falling rain, leaving no further direction. Than decided to follow his intuition and called out into the night, "To an Ann, Kim Ann." The two names called out like an echo, answered only by the sound of rain and a dog howling in the silent night. Strangely, no one in the neighboring houses opened their doors or spoke. The road led to an old, abandoned house. Only an ancient cement foundation remained, overgrown with lush, dense weeds. In Than's vague memory, the house, the garden, the pond from his childhood. Grandma Heen and the villagers often mentioned it. Ms. Zone's family's old land, it seemed, all its inhabitants had starved to death in 1945. His mother said this land was originally bought by his paternal grandmother for his grandparents, and they were building this house when the August Revolution succeeded, forcing them to abandon it. Whenever villagers passed by, they called Ms. Zone's house, garden, and pond the Famine grave. Later, when peace was restored, many people came to live there, but no family lasted long. They constantly encountered misfortunes and strange occurrences, so they packed up and left a short time later. The foundation of this house was built by Than's grandparents, not like ordinary families in ancient society. How could there be such a large cement foundation? It was said that the garden, the house, and the kapok tree at the village entrance were places where many vengeful spirits lingered, not good for business or living. Recently, Than heard my say that before the epidemic, during Tet, the villagers were discussing building a memorial shrine there for the villagers who had starved to death. The remaining land would be used for community activities, but now, due to lack of funds, everything remained just an idea. They wanted Than to contribute some money with everyone else, but then paused. People contributed labor, people contributed money to that land, hoping to reduce its eerie, cold atmosphere. Frankly, a few tens of millions of VND was not a big problem for Than. He could afford it. But when he brought it up to Grandma Heen, she immediately dismissed it. If you contribute, just contribute your share, not like some rich person. That land originally belonged to our family, but they confiscated it, and no one could live there. Now you want me to pay money to appease those hungry ghosts? They're too clever for that. Than felt Grandma Heen was right, so he dropped the idea. But it was only then that Than learned that Ms. Zone's land had once belonged to his own family. Finally, the villagers temporarily erected an incense burner on that land. It was said they invited a very old teacher, one of the few survivors of the famine, to perform a ceremony. They prayed for the spirits of the deceased to protect the people of Lan Thuong village and the nation, that they would always be at peace and quickly overcome calamities and suffering. Those were the teacher's last words. The people of Lan Thuong village promised each other that they would save enough money to continue building. But with the epidemic spreading like this, no one knew when they could resume. In Lan Thuong village, Ms. Zone's land and the kapok tree were two dark places, with the strangest rumors in the village. Born and raised in the village, Than never imagined that he would have to creep there alone in the cold, drizzling rain at almost 2 a.m., looking for his children. And he didn't understand what connection this abandoned house had with the kapok tree where he and his children had been that afternoon. Holding his phone in his hand, Than hesitated, wondering whether to go in or not. After a moment's thought, overcoming his fear, he decided to step into Ms. Zone's garden. In the 21st century, this was one of the few remaining places where nothing had changed. Everything seemed to reappear as it once was amidst the desolation and ruins. Than called out very softly, blending with the falling rain. "Kim Ann, Tuan Ann, are you two here?" He stumbled cautiously in the dark inside, and all was a terrifying silence, not caused by raindrops or the weather. Than felt the cold emanating from the garden plot itself, rough like broken, crumbling brick walls overgrown with green moss. At that moment, through the remaining sparse leaves on the fallen wall, the figure of a woman with long, flowing hair appeared, suffocatingly visible in the left side of the yard. Close by, the newly built villager's foundation was still white with lime. The woman's calls for her child, her cries, sounded mournful, echoing through the rain. "Mom's home, Khang, where are you? Let's go, they've taken our house, what are we doing back here?" The woman's cries turned into sobs. The woman's face slowly turned towards Than. When he clearly saw that face, a chill ran down Than's spine and he almost fainted. It was not a human face, it was merely a skull with deep, black eye sockets. Than thought the skull seemed to have noticed him and glided gently towards him. At this moment, Than froze before the black skull, hovering right in front of him. In a state of extreme panic, Than fell down, trying to crawl away from the skull. Its deep, dark eye sockets stared intently at him. A voice whispered in the wind, "Have you seen my child?" In the depths of his fear, Than shook his head vigorously. "No, I haven't. You people chased him away, didn't you?" The voice grew angry, and the foul-smelling skull pressed close to Than's face, making him fall backward. No, I don't know, I'm just looking for my children too." The eerie laughter rang out again, shrill and harsh. "He's not here. Don't bother looking, it's useless. You'll end up the same. At the big kapok tree, your grandparents did evil deeds. How can their descendants expect to reap good fruit?" Than felt all strength leave his body as he listened to those absurd words. At that moment, he heard human voices and saw flickering lights approaching. "Than, Kim Ann, Tuan Ann, where are you children? Where are my grandchildren?" He recognized it as Mr. Tone's voice and Uncle Tan's echoing in the quiet night. Hearing human voices, the ghost gently retreated towards the pond, where the house's shadow gradually dissolved into nothingness. The calls grew closer. They were standing in front of Ms. Zone's land. They saw Than lying prostrate on the ground. "Are you okay, son?" His father and Uncle Tan, holding flashlights, rushed over, shining their lights all around. Than's face was chalk-white, whether from cold or fear he didn't know. He looked at the two men, unable to hide his fear, and shook his head gently. "I'm okay. Why are you all here? Dad, did you find them?" Before Than could finish his question, both men shook their heads at him. "Your dad and Uncle Tan just got back. After your mother briefly told us what happened, I immediately guessed you might have found something, so your dad and I rushed over." His father looked around Ms. Zone's garden. "Did you find anything yet?" "No, I just arrived and then passed out." Than shook his head. "Well, let's search anyway. We're already here," Uncle Tan interjected. "Then hurry up. If we don't find them, we'll look elsewhere." This area has always had rumors of vengeful spirits. It's not for nothing that the villagers call it the Famine grave. Look, Mr. Tone urged. All three men turned on their flashlights and ventured deeper into the dilapidated house with its moss-covered bricks and overgrown weeds blocking the path. A few more steps deeper inside, all three were drenched in rainwater. The flashlights glinted on the tiled floor. Their calls echoed endlessly in the whistling wind of the late night. Mr. Tone, Than, and Uncle Tan seemed intent on tearing up the entire garden and turning over the collapsed house, but they found no trace or sign of the two children. All three nodded, tacitly understanding. When they looked at the pond nearby, Uncle Tan stepped out. Mr. Tone and Uncle Tan swept their flashlights around. Than, for his part, diligently shone his light on the ground at his feet, secretly hoping he wouldn't find any slippery tracks here. The woman's voice from earlier still buzzed in his mind. Than tried to push it out of his thoughts, but it seemed impossible. If something terrible were to happen, Than didn't know what his life would become. Mr. Tone and Uncle Tan's calls continued steadily in the quiet night. The two men turned to look at Than and continued to shine their lights. They walked around the entire pond and then returned. "Should we go down and check, Anne?" Mr. Tone looked at Uncle Tan and shook his head gently. "If the children had fallen in, there would be slippery tracks on the bank. We haven't seen any traces so far. The pond is completely covered with duckweed, if there were any." Than saw that Mr. Tone had a point. If there were, there would be footprints, slippery tracks. Than had searched very carefully, and he hadn't found any traces. Suddenly, Uncle Tan turned to look at the dilapidated house, a dark expanse, a desolate, gloomy scene not unlike a horror movie. Suddenly, a flock of black crows cawed loudly and swooped down, perching on the crumbling wall. Several others sat on the incense burner amidst the dim white rain. The crows' cries were mournful, piercing to the ear, just like earlier at the kapok tree. Than knew for sure that it was not a good omen. He anxiously looked back at the duckweed-covered pond, its surface flat and still, and thought to himself, perhaps he should take a chance and jump in. Than stood staring at the duckweed-covered pond, lost in thought. Mr. Tone spoke as he walked a considerable distance ahead. "Let's go look elsewhere. Lingering here won't do any good." Than snapped awake, intending to leave the pond bank. With his father and Uncle Tan, Than walked past the dilapidated house. Hearing a sound, footsteps, the crows cawed and flew up. As he passed, Than had an eerie feeling that a pair of eyes behind him had begun to follow the three men's actions. The three men left Ms. Zone's garden around 3 a.m. It was still drizzling, and all three were soaking wet. The village road was deserted, occasionally broken by the sound of a dog howling or frogs croaking in the distance. "Where do we go now, Dad? I'm so worried about the children. Where could they have gone on a night like this?" Anxiety was etched on his father's face. Than had never seen his father's face so haggard and pitiful. Rainwater drenched their hair, making all three faces pale with cold. "Go home for now. Frankly, I don't know where to go or what to do next. We have to report it to the commune police. Maybe the children were kidnapped." Uncle Tan raised the possibility. From the beginning, Than had briefly considered it, but quickly dismissed it. Since Than had no enemies, no one would be idle enough to ambush two children on such a cold night. Now, Than's mind was leaning more towards spiritual and ghostly matters. It wasn't by chance that the dark shadow had led him to the dilapidated house in Ms. Zone's garden. Something hidden must certainly be within. "Whatever it takes, I just want the two children to be safe. I'll accept any price." The commune only starts work in the morning, so reporting it now would be useless. Waiting until then, who knows what else might happen. So what do we do now? Are we just going to wander aimlessly all night? Mr. Tone sighed heavily, heartbroken. "It's all so confusing. Why did this happen? Who did our family wrong?" Than silently followed, but in his mind, he didn't forget that he and the two children had been at the kapok tree that afternoon. Since returning from the kapok tree, so many things had happened to Than and the children. If he told Grandma Heen about this, Than believed she would have sensible advice. Since his grandfather's death, she had always been the most influential voice in the house, even in the Lai Hai family and Lan Thuong village. The three men, soaked like drowned rats, went into the house. Without hearing Than speak, she probably already knew the full story. As they reached the door, Than saw her kneeling before the ancestral altar. On the three incense bowls, each held a single incense stick that had burned down halfway. Looking at the three burning incense sticks, he imagined the scene of an executioner preparing to sever the head of a condemned prisoner in a wuxia film. Even a fleeting thought sent shivers down his spine. Outside, the rain was very cold, but inside the house, Thanh felt an unusual warmth emanating from the incense on the altar. This type of incense was very special, ordered by his grandmother from a trusted source in the mountains. Thanh didn't know how long it had been used, but he had grown up familiar with its scent. Thanh clearly heard Grandma Heen mumbling prayers. Everyone bears their own karma. The two children have done nothing wrong. May their living and departed grandparents protect this family from calamity. I saw the three men standing drenched outside the door and quickly rushed out. Are there any traces of the children? Thanh sadly shook his head. No, Mom, now I don't even know where to look for them. Where did you go looking? Grandma Heen spoke up without turning around. Mai looked at Thanh and gently nodded. I went to the abandoned house in Ms. Zone's garden. Why did you go there? I followed the sound of a woman calling for her child. What? Grandma Heen was startled and surprised. There was a person dressed. Not like a human, Grandma. I saw it in the ruined house. I believe so. More bad than good will come of this. Is it karma from our ancestors that my descendants must bear? As she spoke, the four people in the house felt like kneeling. The ghost's curse echoed in his mind, making Than's mood even more agitated. Tell Grandma what happened yesterday afternoon, Thanh stammered. When we got to the village entrance, the children and I went to the kapok tree to take pictures. Hearing this, Grandma Heen felt her limbs go numb, unable to sit steadily. Thanh had prepared himself to be scolded to death for his mistake, but she only mumbled, has she returned to fulfill her ancient curse? I don't understand. Take Grandma to the kapok tree quickly, while there's still time. Grandma Heen trembled, gripping Than's arm to stand up. Go now, don't hesitate any longer. Mom, put this on. Mai quickly draped a velvet coat over her. Even though such a terrifying event had occurred at their house, the neighbors were utterly unaware. This was because Grandma Heen's family rarely interacted with them, though in the countryside, their neighborly relations were no different from those in the city. Thanh didn't ask further questions, rushing out to the car, opening the door for her. Grandma Heen knelt and bowed 3 times, bidding farewell. Her eyes welled up as she looked at the 3 ancestral portraits on the altar, then stood up and walked to the car. The whole family intended to get in the car, but she stopped Than's mother. You and Thanh can go, the other 3 staying home won't solve anything. Hearing Grandma Heen say this, all 4 were extremely surprised, unable to understand why she made such a sudden decision. However, her old age made her as autocratic as ever. Usually, few relatives dared to disobey her. Everyone knew that whatever she did had a hidden meaning and reason. Remember not to let the 3 incense sticks go out. Mai nodded. Yes. Anything else, Mom? Grandma Heen looked at her daughter-in-law for a moment, about to say something more, but then remained silent, looking back at the old house, her eyes full of longing, then resolutely got into the car. The car's headlights sliced a white beam, tearing through the thick dark night. Under the faint drizzle, the car stopped on the road about 20 meters from the kapok tree. At this hour, the village road was deserted, with no one passing by. This was the first time in his life that Thanh stood before the kapok tree in the middle of the night, nearing dawn. He watched the black kapok tree standing majestically like a mountain. The car's headlights caused the crows to wake, cawing and scattering into the air. The car door opened, and Thanh quickly helped his grandmother out. The 4 people stood looking at the kapok tree. Grandma Heen turned to look at the dark road leading from the kapok tree to the village, flickering with luminous shadows like will-o'-the-wisps. The last path of the hungry ghosts, I never thought the past would meet the present here. Thanh secretly glanced back at the road, seeing shimmering white specks like foxfire, closely following each other. Don't look back, let's go into the tree hollow, Grandma Heen urged again. The 2 grandparents quietly went into the shrine. Grandma Heen walked first on the soft, wet, grassy path. The white specks followed the 2 people, growing closer and more numerous. Thanh didn't know if Grandma Heen knew that behind them were not mere specks of foxfire, but the skeletons of people, old and young, big and small, rising from both sides of the road where the 4 had just passed. Their unsteady steps moved closer towards the 2. Thanh timidly backed away and cried out, Grandma! Grandma Heen seemed to know exactly what was happening here. Let them be, a bunch of hungry, wretched ghosts who haven't found peace for so many years, Grandma Heen said in a cold voice, without a hint of hesitation or fear. The closer they got to the kapok tree's base, the more piercingly the crows cawed. The crows' angry, resentful cries seemed to target the 2, as if they were about to swoop down. As their feet touched the kapok tree's canopy, they began to step into the yard. A cold gust of air blew from nowhere, the wind and rain intensified, lashing at the 2. A raging storm, accompanied by heavy rain, lashed directly at Grandma Heen's face, making her sway, almost collapsing. The storm instantly drenched both of them. By now, she could no longer maintain her dignified lead, standing like a desperate old woman enduring the tempest. The umbrella Than held for them was thin and small, unable to withstand the fury of heaven and earth. Red kapok flowers rained down from overhead. Than looked up at the corpse of the woman in the black dress, hanging precariously from the kapok tree branch. Behind Than, in the ethereal night, human skeletons, or more precisely, glowing will-o'-the-wisps, had formed a circle, surrounding the two grandparents as if awaiting a judge, a condemned prisoner. After which those skeletons would rush to tear the two apart. The wind and rain stopped. The silence was chilling, as if foreboding a new storm. Grandma Heen stared intently at the shrine, which was no longer covered in green moss but was pitch black as if smoked. "Grandson, go inside the kapok tree's hollow and search." "Yes, Grandma." Than immediately nodded, but he hadn't yet entered. Outside, the dark shadows began to become clearer. The woman and the child. Than recognized the first two. Behind them were many others. They all looked similar, as Grandma Heen had said. They were the starved corpses, the hungry ghosts. Than had heard of them in books, but he had ignored them, and now he was witnessing these horrifying images firsthand. But at this point, Than was not lucid enough to discern whether what he saw before him were moving human skeletons, ghosts, or actual human beings. By some invisible power, they had come to life, just as Than had seen them moments earlier, slowly crawling up along the roadside, following Than and Grandma Heen to the village road leading to the kapok tree. "You remember the old curse, don't you? Before my mother and I left, your family seized our house and property. You forced my mother and me to choose this kapok tree as our refuge, and then we starved and froze to death here. Do you know, today is the death anniversary of my mother and me. It's not just my mother and me, there are many others in Lan Thuong village. If back then your family had shown a little compassion, lent a helping hand, perhaps there wouldn't be so many wretched wandering ghosts like this. Now, in the third generation, that spirit's wish has been granted and your family line should end it all." Grandma Heen's eyes widened, glaring into the deep void, a faint smile playing on her lips. "Please don't speak of human kindness. By now I spit on such false words. In that situation, would anyone willingly give their food to another? Or would you yourselves just tear each other apart? Each generation bears its own karma. These children are innocent, you hungry ghosts, leave them alone." The woman's voice shot back through the air. "Even now, you still maintain that arrogant, haughty tone of a superior. After all these years, you still show no remorse for the sins your family has inflicted upon this entire Lan Thuong village. My family has no fault with Lan Thuong village and you hungry ghosts. Stop talking so much and release my two grandchildren at once. If you don't remember, or have deliberately forgotten, then let me remind you of what your family has done, and what you and your descendants will have to bear because of what your ancestors caused." Grandma Heen's face turned purple as if the shadow of the woman was dissolving, revealing a deep void, like a three-dimensional space, replaying all of Grandma Heen's old memories from many years ago. The poor were the first victims in the tidal wave of death that had just begun to engulf Lan Thuong village. Ms. Zone's family lived in the middle of the village. Their current land was the oldest in the village. Earlier generations recounted that it was the first ancestral land where people settled to establish Lan Thuong village. All the geomancers at that time affirmed that the land had good feng shui, bringing prosperity to future generations. Therefore, many wealthy families in the village vied with each other to acquire that land. Mr. Kim, Ms. Zone's father-in-law, was an old Confucian scholar whose time had passed. Wealthy families embraced westernized lifestyles, with Western script and the national language taking precedence, and Confucian culture becoming obsolete and useless. The poor worried about filling their hungry stomachs, so no one cared about literary pursuits. Mr. Kim didn't believe in feng shui but in Confucian philosophy, placing virtue above all else. He sowed virtue and benevolence so that future generations would reap blessings, not prosperity from the land's position. But the nouveau rich in Lan Thuong village didn't think so. They only waited for an opportunity to seize that ancestral land by any means. And the opportunity came. One person's tragedy and misfortune became another's opportunity. The land was now a juicy bait for the nouveau rich in the village, especially for the family of landlord Lai Hai. one of the most prominent and ambitious people in the village, who wanted that land to build an estate for his eldest son Lai-heen and his wife when they started their own family. In the past, when a daughter married, she often took her husband's name. As the winter-spring harvest ended in Lan Thuong village, only rice stalks remained, and the villagers knew famine was imminent. Partly due to high taxes and levies, partly due to Japanese policies forcing people to uproot rice to plant jute, castor beans, and seize rice and grain for war purposes. The public transportation of rice from the south to the north's communication lines caused rice and grain prices to soar. In 1943, 1 quintal of official rice was 31 dong, the black market price was 57 dong. In 1944, it increased to 40 dong, the black market price was 350 dong. But by early 1945, it officially soared to 53 dong, while the black market price ranged from 700 to 800 dong. Rice prices skyrocketed, making it impossible for people to afford food, forcing them to starve to death. Famine spared no one, especially the poor, laborers, particularly landless farmers who worked as hired hands and small landowners. To combat starvation and impending death, the people of Lan Thuong village ate everything from wild vegetables to banana peels, tree bark, and even centipedes, buffalo, cattle, dogs, and cats. Camp dwellers ate young grass and dead fish. When there was nothing left to eat, they would sit and wait to die, for their families to bury them, or die in the bushes while foraging for food. Death came slowly and tragically, tormenting both body and soul. Famine caused fathers to abandon children, husbands to abandon wives, severing human bonds, brotherhood, parenthood, and neighborly ties. If begging failed, they resorted to theft. In Lan Thuong village, thousands of households lost entire families. Many lineages had only a few survivors. Every night, mixed with the tragic cries of crows, one could hear the groans of the dying. He saw masses of bones writhing, close to death. Here, 3 or 5 people died. There, piles of living lay interspersed with the dead. On carts piled with corpses, each cart was covered by only a single mat. In mass graves, hundreds of corpses were buried in layers at a time. A few rotten vegetables among the bodies, a few grains of rice, pieces of spilled sweet potato next to a rice granary, they would flock to fight over it like hungry devils. They would eat anything from rats to cockroaches as long as it could fill their stomachs to satisfy their hunger. But then everything ran out. The villagers left Lan Thuong village in endless streams, including entire families. The elderly, children, men, women, each one gaunt from poverty, naked, skinny, bony, and trembling. Occasionally, someone would stop to close the eyes of a person in the crowd who had fallen and would never rise again, or to strip a ragged piece of cloth, whatever it was called, to cover the body of the deceased. The village road leading to the kapok tree. These images reappeared in Than's eyes this very night. Mr. Kim's family, Ms. Zone's father-in-law, was no exception. 8 members of the family died of starvation. With every crow's cry in the night at the kapok tree in front of the house, another person collapsed. The first deaths were met with many cries and lamentations, but then they gradually subsided. The living lay beside the dead, no one strong enough to bury their loved ones. Mr. Kim's family eventually consisted only of Ms. Zone, Mr. Kim, and his eldest grandson, Khang. How about Zone selling this house to Mr. Hai and his wife? Zone hesitated, but now they'll take whatever they can get. As long as I and Khang are alive, that's enough. If we have people, we have possessions, but if we sell it, where will we go, father? The kapok tree, he said, and then said no more. Khang was lying there, gasping for breath. Zone closed her father's eyes. More accurately, it was a skeleton with open eyes, but those eyes had closed, bidding farewell to the mortal world. She burst into tears. Perhaps she was the last one in the house strong enough to cry. Zone left Khang and her mother to go begging. She stumbled out of the house, wearing only tattered, faded clothes, and went to landlord Lai Hai's house. Than lingered outside Mr. Hai's gate for a long time, watching No clear the leftover food from the kitchen. Zone timidly reached out and called to him. No recognized Zone as an old acquaintance immediately. Seeing an old friend and the leftover food, No shook his head, signaling he had nothing left in his hand, but Zone also shook her head, signaling she wasn't there to beg for scraps, but just to talk. No looked around, placed the food tray by the well, and ran to Zone, speaking very quickly. "What do you need, Zone? How is everything at your house?" Zone shook her head, her eyes full of sorrow, looking inside the house. "Tell Mr. Hai that Master 2 wants to sell the land." No exclaimed, "How much can you sell it for now? Where will you go after selling it?" "Whatever I can get. My whole family is dead, it's just me and Khang left." No rummaged in his pants pocket and gave her a few coins. "Take this, buy rice for your grandson. I haven't forgot my teacher's kindness, but this is all I have." Xoan pulled her hand back, but No kept pressing it into her hand. "You keep it, you can pay me back later if you want." Mr. Hai's shouting from inside the house echoed all the way to the backyard. "What are you sneaking and stealing in the kitchen, you scoundrel? If there's any left, I've already taken it all. Get in here now." Help me talk to him," Xoan timidly said. No nodded, went into the kitchen, and carried a kettle of boiling water upstairs. Xoan was entranced by the few in her hand, watching No's figure carrying the kettle into the house. A moment later, Heen came out to open the gate. "I just spoke to him, he wants you and I to go in." Xoan bowed her head and walked inside. It was her first time at the High house, and she hadn't realized how wealthy he was. The floor was paved with Western marble, and 2 cranes stood on turtle shells as tall as her head, leading to the ancestral altar. On it were 3 black and white photographs. These were of Mr. Hai's deceased father, who had once been a village chief. By Mr. Hai's generation, the family's fortunes had declined somewhat, but they still held official positions. Xoan hadn't expected to meet so many people from Mr. Hai's family. "So, Xoan, the old man is already up. I heard what No said, you've come to sell the house, haven't you?" Xoan looked around fearfully, as if afraid the family members would rush out and devour her. It was a long moment before she dared to speak. "Yes, sir." "How much do you want?" Mr. Hai spoke condescendingly, in the slow, drawn-out tone of a superior. "Yes, sir, Master Tu told me to ask for 5 dong. That's all I can ask for now." "Do you think money is clamshells? 5 dong now, if I wanted to, I could legitimately buy this entire commune," he shouted, making Xoan jump in fear. "If it weren't for that old geomancer's words, you wouldn't even set foot in here. The road here, whatever it costs, is fine." She only needed food to save herself and her son, who were writhing in hunger and thirst. "Yes, sir, whatever you want to pay is fine." "Wouldn't it have been easier to say that from the beginning, and you still dared to haggle with me? I'll give you 1 dong." Hearing Mr. Hai say this, Xoan was overjoyed inside. With that money, she and her son could at least temporarily overcome their hunger. Mr. and Mrs. Heen, standing nearby, were startled. "Why is he paying so much, master?" "I haven't finished with the condition. You must take all the corpses of your family members wherever you want, but not leave them there. I'm buying a house, not dead bodies." Xoan froze, but then nodded in agreement. After all, it was something that needed to be done. Loyalty to the dead meant burying them, and she couldn't sell the house and leave 6 corpses crawling with maggots. Even now, the hunger made her unsteady, on the verge of collapsing. "Yes, sir, it's fine. Then bring out the papers." Heen went inside, brought out papers, seals, and the land sale contract. "You go bury all the corpses of your husband, father, son, brothers, and then come back for the money. I don't want to see you and your child lingering here anymore." "Sir," Xoan hesitated. Mr. Hai shouted, "Hurry up and then come get the money. If there are any unburied corpses, I'll deduct money for them. Could you possibly advance me a few dong so I can go buy rice for my grandson?" "Heen, go to the kitchen and scoop out a scoop of rice for her. Remember, after you eat, get out of here, understand? If I catch you and your child there again, I'll beat you to a pulp." Heen went to the kitchen, scooped a can of rice and brought it up, flinging it in front of Xoan. "There, that's it, get out of here, you dirty, hungry ghosts." Xoan bent down, picked up the bag of rice, and dejectedly walked away. As Xoan's shadow disappeared, Heen grumbled to his mother. "I don't want to go there. It's so gloomy and cold. How can my family endure that? All the geomancers say it's the best feng shui land in the village. Most importantly, it's perfect for my wife and I. If we have children there, our descendants will be glorious forever." Mrs. Hai immediately spoke up. "Then I'll send the workers to build an estate for our 2 children. It won't be inferior to this house. How could I let my niece suffer any disadvantage, right?" Hearing this, Heen shyly leaned against her husband's back, secretly smiling contentedly. "But I think the price of 1 dong for that land is too cheap for them." The old man burst out laughing. "I said that so she would believe it and clear out all those corpses. A can of rice and that piece of land is already too much for her." The entire High landlord family burst into laughter, praising the old man's clever and utterly cruel scheme. Xoan brought the rice home late in the afternoon, lit a fire, quickly poured all the rice into a pot, and cooked white porridge for herself and her son. They divided it equally. Xoan couldn't give all her share to her son as tears welled up, looking at the 6 rotting, maggot-infested corpses of her family members scattered on the floor. She feared that if she didn't eat, she wouldn't have enough strength to dig a large enough grave to bury 6 people and return to Hai's house tomorrow morning to receive the money from selling the land. If she didn't, both she and her son would starve to death. The pot of white porridge was empty, but mother and son felt as if they had never eaten. That little amount was nothing compared to the hunger they were enduring. Xoan looked at her son and said, "We have to go now, son. I've sold this house." "Where are we going, Mom?" "Go to the kapok tree and wait for me there. When I'm done, I'll bring you lots of food." At the mention of food, Khang's eyes lit up and he nodded eagerly. Mother and son stood up. Xoan took a few small belongings and they left the house hand in hand, heading excitedly for the kapok tree. Khang felt no regret for the house because, hearing his mother's words, he was about to eat. That was what he truly wanted. As for Xoan, she intended to take her son there. She would then return to bury the 6 corpses of her family members, then go to Hai's house to get the money, and then back to the kapok tree. I don't know what the coming days would hold for the mother and son. Would they join that procession of beggars? From a distance, a corner of the sky glowed red with kapok flowers. Mother and son sheltered each other in the cold, drizzling rain and wind. Kapok flowers bloom in March. Old women die of cold in March. She and her son approached the kapok tree. It was also the home of a flock of crows, and the hollow of that kapok tree was now Khang's home. A baby's skeleton was nestled in the hollow of the kapok tree. "Wait for Mom here. Mom will bring you food." Khang nodded. Xoan smiled, a withered smile, bidding farewell. Xoan left the kapok tree, returning to her old house as dusk began to fall. She set to work digging graves to bury her family members in the wasteland at the end of the garden. That land was originally ownerless, belonging to no one, or rather, some parts of it were like her family's. It was the duckweed-covered pond where Thanh had searched for his children. Before, it was a garden, but others came, dug up the earth to make bricks, and thus it became such a pond. And the skeletons of Ms. Xoan's family members had been taken by them and buried. In the dead of night, the shadow of a gaunt woman was laboriously digging up handfuls of earth to place the remains of her husband, parents, siblings, which were rotting underground, to return to Mother Earth. She tried to gather everything in the house that could be used to wrap the deceased, to lessen the cold and bleakness, and to properly honor the family as they had lived on Earth. She completed the task by dawn, an extraordinary feat for both the living and the dead. In one night, she had buried 6 sets of remains without incense smoke, without candles, without tears, and with no mounds rising above the ground. Old members of Mr. Hai's family knew that by some twist of fate, she had buried all 6 bodies with their heads facing the house that had once been theirs. She stood silently before her family's grave, letting the dirt and sand, reeking of death, cling to her. She had lived with the dead all night. The stench of decay clung to her, unwashable, leaving her weak and worn out like a ghost. She went to landlord Lai Hai's house to demand payment. In the morning, No was surprised to see Xoan standing like a dazed ghost at the gate, waiting. No came out. "Go tell your masters I'm done. I've come for the money." No went back inside, looked, and then came out again. "The masters went to Viet. Last night only the young master and mistress were home." No stammered. Xoan knelt. "Sir, please ask him to meet me." No hesitated for a moment, then nodded and went in. Xoan stood there to wait. A moment later, Heen and No came out, still maintaining an arrogant and haughty demeanor. Heen glared at Xoan. Although Heen was more than a decade younger than Xoan, in the eyes of people like Heen, Xoan was merely a bunch of starving, wretched savages, not a person of equal status. "What are you doing here?" "I'm here to collect the money for the house I sold yesterday. I've finished the job." "Burying 6 corpses in one night, you're quite skilled, but I need to send people to inspect it first." "I can't trust your deceptive lot. Hoi, fuck, go check her house." "Yes, madam." The 2 farmhands seemed to have prepared beforehand. Waiting only for Heen's command, the 2 men walked past No and Heen, heading straight into the village. Xoan watched their brisk figures walk away, tears welling up in her eyes, but by now she no longer had the strength to follow them, to beg and explain. Heen glanced at Xoan, sneering, "Do you think 1 dong from this house is so easy to get?" "A can of rice yesterday afternoon was already too much for that land." Heen said so. Xoan was stunned. Madam?" Heen stomped off into the house, indignant. Xoan collapsed right at the gate. No looked at Xoan with pity. "Wait for Hoi and Fuck to come back and see." Xoan looked up towards the road where Hoi and Fuck had gone. The sun was rising. It was only then that she saw the 2 of them returning. Xoan was truly anxious, blaming herself for being too trusting. And more importantly, for taking her son to the kapok tree. She truly didn't want him in that house, watching her bury the heavily decomposing bodies of her relatives. Hoi and Fuck saw No and Xoan at the gate. The two men didn't wait for them to ask questions, but quickly went straight inside. A moment later, Heen and the two men angrily came out. "Did you come to sell our house, or did you come to sell us a grave? These two reported that you buried all 6 corpses in your garden. So you still dare to show your face here to demand money?" Xoan burst into tears and shook her head. "That's an abandoned plot of land. It doesn't belong to anyone." "These two said it. That grave you buried yesterday is on your land." Xoan, her face streaked with tears, shook her head repeatedly. "You too, kick her out of here. If she lingers here again, I'll break her legs for her." Heen referred to herself as Madam, even to people older than herself, acting as the successor to the Lai Hai family. No and Fuck, hearing their mistress's words, pushed and hit Xoan, but fortunately No was still there to intervene, so Xoan only suffered minor scrapes. "You dare to defend her, No? Beat that No for me, and we'll see if you still eat after this." Heen's face urged them on, but Hoi and Fuck only glared at No like chained dogs, not daring to rush forward. She turned to No and Xoan. At that time, only 2 people were left in Heen's house. If they hadn't, the 2 would surely not have made it out alive. Xoan and No had walked a short distance from the Lai Hai landlord's gate, but they could still hear Heen's curses. In the depths of her fury, Xoan stood up, turned back to Heen's gate, stood in front of Heen, and looked directly into the house. "With all your cruelty, wickedness, and lack of virtue, I curse your entire family line to be cut off childless. All your descendants will have to suffer the consequences of what you have done." Heen froze, looking at Xoan's eyes, which were bloodshot like 2 drops of blood. Heen was furious, wanting to lunge and tear her apart, but dared not. No quickly turned back and pulled Xoan away. "Those people are coming back, we can't escape them." No pulled Xoan. Heen stood rooted to the spot like a tree in the middle of the yard. When they reached the village entrance, No finally let go of Xoan, fearing she would turn back. "I'm sorry." No shook his head. "Forget it, I don't know where I'll go, but I can't go back there." Xoan silently looked back at the Lai Hai landlord family. She knew No couldn't go back there, neither could she. Xoan pulled a few coins from her pocket and placed them in No's hand. "You keep them." No looked at the stream of beggars, stumbling like ghosts, and gently shook his head. "I don't know yet, but I think I'll follow them to Hanoi. Will you come with me?" Xoan shook her head. The 2 stopped at the fork in the road and the kapok tree. Xoan turned towards the kapok tree, while No followed the endless stream of beggars. Hanoi was the final destination for those wretched ghosts. Back at the kapok tree. Inside the hollow of that kapok tree, Khang lay like a skeleton, breathing faintly, surrounded by discarded rags and kapok flowers that he had eaten last night to fight off the cold hunger. Somehow, Xoan had managed to crawl inside to embrace her poor child. Her lullaby rose and then faded. The mother and son continued on under the season's most brilliant red kapok blossoms, with spring rain still drizzling. Spring, summer, and autumn had changed, and the fields had changed color. The kapok tree no longer bore red flowers, but was bursting with green, preparing for another kapok season. No, among that crowd of beggars, surged back to Lan Thuong village, as powerful as a flood named Viet Minh. Ms. Xoan's house and garden, which Lai Hai was building for Heen and his wife, were forced to halt construction, their wishes for prosperous descendants cut short. The Lai Hai family house began to witness continuous funerals from that point on. The French had returned. Lai Hai's wife and children, led by collaborators, were executed by guerrillas, eliminated. The French were utterly exposed. The land reform struggle took place. Grandma Heen's husband, the last remaining child of the Lai Hai family, was beheaded in the communal yard right before her eyes and the entire village of Lan Thuong. That is why her deep blood feud only grew longer. She believed Ms. Xoan's curse on her family was real. It had come true, and she believed even more in the words of the geomancers who had warded off evil from his house. It might not be as prosperous as before, but after all, she still had Tone, Than, Tuan An, and Kim An. People accumulate good deeds, but she accumulated hatred for her descendants. Now, before her eyes, other images appeared, even more horrific than anything she had witnessed over the past nearly 70 years. In the night, she saw the skeletons of the starved villagers from Lan Thuong of yesteryear. Leading them were Xoan, Khang, her son, and others from Mr. Keem's family. And many others whose faces she couldn't remember had brought her 2 grandchildren to the house, the land of eternal glory. The pond nearly 70 years ago, in the night, a woman had dug a grave to bury 6 family members. With the changing times, they had dug it up to make bricks for the duckweed-covered pond. The 2 innocent children struggled and thrashed, but many hands dragged them down until the duckweed surface in the pond was calm as before. Only the mournful caws of crows continued. "No, not like this." The woman's chilling, delighted laughter echoed through the air. If only Grandma and her family had understood back then and accumulated a little virtue for their descendants, then today, Grandma wouldn't have to come to this place to beg and plead. Everything is too late. Grandma Heen collapsed completely, silent in the depths of her suffering. But the film of her life was not over. She saw 3 coffins, 2 small, 1 large. Than and Mai stood weeping. The person in the portrait was herself and the grandchild who called her aunt. The final image she saw was a young man tying a white cloth to the kapok tree branch. The face of that person was none other than Than, her beloved grandson. She slowly collapsed, dazed and unconscious. The next morning, the villagers of Lan Thuong discovered the 2 children had drowned in the pond in Ms. Zone's abandoned garden. They blamed each other, saying that if the construction project had been completed earlier with a locked gate, children wouldn't have been able to enter, and there would have been no tragic deaths. But the villagers didn't understand why the city children had come here to meet such a tragedy. Hearing the news of her grandchildren's death, Grandma Heen also fell silent, sinking into unconsciousness, her hand waving as if catching dragonflies. A few days later, the villagers of Lan Thuong spoke amongst themselves that in nearly 70 years, there had never been 3 funerals so close together in one family, with no one to send them off. People said it was due to the epidemic, but Than, he knew why. He looked with swollen, tear-filled eyes towards the kapok tree at the village entrance, and the crows cawed mournfully again, as if foretelling. Another person was about to depart this world.